Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chris Politano. I'm the current president of Evansville Real Radio, located here in Evansville, Indiana. I do want to thank you all for tuning in to this evening's show, which would be Dr. Moss's political commentary. Dr. Moss has the webpage exodusmd.com as well. So you can also check out some of his writings over there. And he also is doing a little bit of writing every now and again for the Vanderburg Independent Press. So you can check him out as he is working with Vanderburg Independent Press as well. So we do thank you again for tuning in this Thursday evening and ask that you would continue to tune in with us as we get that ready to go. I do want to make a couple of announcements. One is that we, of course, are broadcasting live from our studios at 815 John Street, which is the business incubator, and we have a studio there up on the second floor, which is where we broadcast to you from live each week. And on June 3rd, we'll be having a little pickup event here, and what you would be able to pick up is being able to pick up a little bit of meat if you pre-order some to have, and that is for us as a fundraiser, is why we are doing that. And we do hope that some of you will consider buying that to help fund the station so that we can get on air. And what we're selling is we are selling pork butts for $25. And you can go to evansvillefm.org to order one of those, or you can contact me directly. So that's two ways that you can order. We will also have order forms located at various places around the city. So we do hope that you would consider buying that. We'll also be selling pork ribs for $20, and we'll be selling chicken quarters for $3. So that is one of our fundraisers. Do have a little bit of exciting news. Most of you know that we had a Kickstarter campaign, and that Kickstarter campaign, unfortunately, did not seem like it was going to have a success, and ultimately it did not have a success. However, the material that we're going to buy, which is broadcast equipment for the studio, that particular equipment turns out that the gentleman who was closing down that low power FM in Kentucky and was selling this equipment, that he was willing to also sell to us some of that equipment at a lower cost, where we eliminated some of the equipment that ended up being a little bit redundant for us. So we kind of had our own little Kickstarter campaign, and we have had enough pledged in order to probably buy that equipment very, very soon. If you're interested, you can still contribute to that cause. And again, the way to contribute is if you go to evansvillefm.org, you can click on the Give tab, and then you can click on the Donate button, and you can donate to us through PayPal, or you can buy some of the materials that we have available through the webpage. One of those things that we sell through there is the Gold Value Coupon books, which cost $18 but have hundreds of dollars worth of savings. And you can feel free to tune in there to that. So we don't want to keep boring you with all the details of our fundraising efforts, but we do appreciate those who have contributed to our fundraising effort, and we do have ongoing fundraising efforts. So we just wanted to let you in on that. But if you want to purchase some of that meat, again, you can contact me or any of the other board members. That would be April Sandifer or Jack Gerhardt. And if you check those out, you can order that meat. And again, it's $25 for a pork butt, and we're going to be smoking that, so it'll be nice, tender, and flavorful meat. And also, we will have pork ribs, and we will have chicken quarters. So without further ado, I am going to switch over to Dr. Moss's broadcast. This is a pre-recorded broadcast. Dr. Moss is not here with me in the studio, but we do have that pre-recorded, and hopefully it's going to go without a hitch and play just the way that it is supposed to, although sometimes we had a little technical difficulty with these things. Thank you for tuning in.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Richard Moss, Jasper, Indiana, ear, nose, and throat doctor, husband, father of 4, political columnist, author, ran for Congress last year, the 8th District against Larry Bucshon, Republican Party, and thinking about giving it another run, but we'll see. We're thinking about it for now. And as always, there's no shortage of things to talk about. And there's so many outrages, but for me, one of the big outrages that is occurring around the country every day, in particular on our college campuses, is these social justice thugs. They refer to themselves as social justice warriors, but I would not give them such a kind or generous appellation. I think thugs is really quite appropriate, and actually I would take it further. I think referring to them for what they are, which is social justice Nazis, is really quite appropriate. They're hard at it again, basically attempting to silence free speech and to eliminate dissent. I mean, these are Stalinists, and they go about this business of making it impossible for anyone who has a different opinion to speak. And most recently, we've heard about Ann Coulter's speech at UC Berkeley being canceled. She's obviously a conservative speaker. Milo Yiannopoulos is another well-known conservative. A couple of months ago, I believe, was his time at Berkeley was canceled as well, again by these same social justice thugs. I should mention that Milo Yiannopoulos is a particularly interesting character. He's half Jewish. He is a flaming homosexual and a arch conservative, and such a useful individual for the cause, because someone like him obviously usually is a big lib, is a big liberal, and goes down, checks all the boxes. And this guy was just really a hard core conservative. And so I'd recommend it to you. He was formerly with Breitbart. He's part of the London office, or ran the London office. So he's got an appealing accent as well. And but anyway, he was forced to cancel his speech. We recall the speech by Charles Murray, who is really an esteemed sociologist and author of a number of best-selling books, including most recently Coming Apart, referring to the coming apart of white America, which we can talk about at another time. But so here he was coming to speak at Middlebury College in Connecticut, and he was with a very liberal Democrat professor who was his interlocutor, and they were threatened, and his venue was canceled as well. And actually, the liberal Democrat professor was hurt in the melee that occurred, and she had to go to the emergency room. So, these such events are becoming quite commonplace, and so I think it's important to recognize fascism when you see it. They refer to themselves almost absurdly as Antifa, as in they are the anti-fascists. But the reality is that, first of all, fascism's roots are deeply in the soil of the left, of Leninism, Bolshevism, and then Stalinism. And Mussolini was a socialist before he became a fascist. And Hitler obviously was the Nazi Party stood for National Socialism, obviously the quintessential fascist, and on down the line. And we see the fascist movement, the tactics of the left, which are completely fascistic and characterized generally, as we see, by street violence. And obviously that's what's going on. It's not Republicans, my friends, who are shouting obscenities and, burning down buildings or breaking windows and attacking innocent bystanders, more or less vandalizing private property. They are, that's just something that Republicans generally don't do. I mean, it's almost funny to really even think about it. It's not a Republican conservative thing. I mean, most of us are busy working and supporting our families or going to church and things of that nature. In other words, we are participating members, productive members of the civil society. And most of us don't have time for rioting in the streets. But the left apparently has no shortage of such individuals, and we should recall and realize that many of them are heavily funded by that notorious Hungarian Jewish billionaire by the name of George Soros. And I'll tell you, if you had to think of one person who we can really place the blame for the radicalization of the Democrat Party and the radicalization of the left in general in this country, it's George Soros. The man was a Nazi collaborator and came to this country, which gave him, obviously the freedom, but incredible opportunities. And, he took advantage of that and now uses his billions to bring down the great country that gave him his freedom. So truly somebody who should be tried in a court of law and investigated, and really someone who's done enormous damage to the country. So we really must confront the left and start putting pressure on these college campuses. I think that in many ways the PC dogma, the PC ideology and its commissars and ideology enforcers, I believe they've hit their high water mark already. It doesn't mean that they're fading away. Obviously they're not. They remain truly a threat to the country. They are a dangerous force. But this whole phenomenon of PC, of this acceptable ideology that and groupthink that counts as acceptable opinion and thought and speech, has really been a shackle on the collective mind of the country. It imposes a kind of censorship and silencing of dissent, and really is quite oppressive. And obviously it emerges from the college campus. And that's where so much of all that is really foul and odious in the country emerges. All these people majoring in things like, gender studies and Latino studies and so forth. I just think, they've got too much time on their hands. I mean, these are what I think we can refer to as burger flipping majors. I mean, what use do they serve in the market other than to create dissent and disruption in the civil society? And so, we've got too many of these majors, too many of these individuals that are studying subjects, and it's really the breeding ground of so much that I think is really a stain on the country, and again, very disruptive. But so we have this phenomenon then of political correctness, and I think we're beginning to see a powerful backlash where we're no longer willing to accept it. We're fighting back against it. I mean, we have individuals that have been doing it all along, and obviously conservative talk radio and so forth, but various groups on college campuses and college Republicans and Young Americans for Freedom and other groups and individuals that are doing that. David Horowitz is the Freedom Center, and many such individuals that really have been quite courageous and going truly into the lion's den when you go to these college campuses. I mean, this notion, for example, of intersectionality. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this term, but again, just another outlandish and really absurd concept in which you more or less have this scorecard of the various ways in which an individual is parsed based on his, I guess we can say, victimhood score. So, someone that would be, black, gay, or lesbian woman would obviously rate very high on this so-called intersectionality scorecard. And, someone who is white and gay, let's say, I mean, they sort of score points on the oppression scale for being gay. But if they're a white male, that doesn't count. That's sort of a negative. And this way of dividing the country and the culture and individuals is so utterly destructive. And again, another example of just how the college campuses have done so much damage to the country and to our culture. And I think we really need to take on the college campuses, at the level of the student body, supporting the various pro-American conservative groups that we do have, and taking on these radical leftists, but also the administrative side of things. To me, if there is a speech by a conservative speaker that's canceled, as they always say, because of, they can't guarantee their security or the threat of violence, well, it's not the conservatives that are threatening the violence. It's the left and the various, left-wing anarchist, social justice thug groups that are responsible for that. These groups should be held accountable. They should be held responsible for whatever that bill should be for the additional security that's needed. I think any of these thugs that, engages in disruptive behavior, and obviously acts of violence and damaging private property, they should be arrested and they should be fined. I mean, and that should start right away. And we need the local police on the campuses, and if necessary, the National Guard, quite frankly, to be mobilized to protect and implement the rule of law. I mean, we need, again, to instill law and order in our cities, where we're having, riot after riot for various reasons, as we recall, in terms of the Black Lives Matter and other such groups. And now we see so much activity of this sort going on in our college campuses. And then I think the administrators and the various, faculty and administrators, presidents, vice presidents, and so forth, if they are not maintaining the freedom of speech, in other words, maintaining constitutional rights, the Bill of Rights for our students on the college campuses, they need to be held account. And one of the ways that we can hold them account is by cutting their funding. And all of them get federal funds. And if they're not defending the rights of all students, not just left-wing students, but all students. I mean, we pay the money through our taxes and through, the tuition and so forth. And so to imagine that we're sending our children there to get an education, only to find them 4 years later to have been brainwashed. Anyway, we have a right to demand that they uphold the rule of law and defend the constitutional rights of all students at risk of federal funding. And again, jailing of those who engage in violence, including the destruction of private property and attacking innocent bystanders. and so forth. And so it really is time to have a full-throated confrontation with the left and take back our college campuses. And of course, our cities and around the country. Anyway, I think we're seeing pushback against political correctness and the dogma, the ideology of the left, which is felt to be the only acceptable opinion. It's time for us to push back on that. Folks, Dr. Moss, this is Evansville Real Radio at WCRY. So let me move on. I wrote an article about Obamacare and RhinoCare, I should say, the Republican offer after 7 years of talking about repealing Obamacare. They never did it. Instead, they preserved Obamacare, but they made it worse. And so the article is entitled Republicans Save Obamacare and Actually Make It Worse, which they did. And let me just say that the critical features of Obamacare that were preserved in the RhinoCare bill that eventually went down in flames, thanks to our courageous 18 congressmen in the Freedom Caucus, and I applaud them, even though they were attacked by the usual suspects, Paul Ryan and quite frankly President Trump as well. And let me mention Larry Bouchon, our congressman, which is really quite typical of him. But you have to understand that the critical features of Obamacare, the regulations that made it just a sort of economically impossible, are two features. The one is what is called community rating, which means you got to charge the same price for everyone. And then the other is guaranteed issue, which means that you have to give insurance to everyone, regardless of their condition. And, of course, everyone will go on about, okay, so you don't want to provide insurance for someone with pre-existing conditions. And, we have answers to that. But let me just explain that these two interlocking mechanisms more or less destroyed the market. And they do so because if somebody can get insurance and pay the same price, let's say if they have a serious illness as someone that is healthy, and they can get it at any point, let's say they wait until they're diagnosed with some serious illness like cancer or heart disease, and then at that point they can get it because of guaranteed issue. What that does is it forces insurance companies to raise the premiums on those that are healthy in order to afford the insurance that they are mandated to provide for everyone at any point. And so you, in effect, destroy the healthcare market. And this is what is referred to as the insurance death spiral. So maybe the best way to understand this is to imagine a life insurance company that was forced by the government to charge a 75-year-old the same as a 25-year-old, or to coerce an auto insurance company to charge the same after a car accident as before. And obviously, this is economically illiterate, and all you achieve is the destruction of the healthcare industry, which is there to try to provide insurance and to serve healthcare consumers. And so you really have to move away from that. There's just no alternative. And they were, in fact, preserved in the RhinoCare bill. And so it rightly went down in flames, as it should have. I'll just mention that in explaining why Obamacare was so bad because you'll have the left that is saying, okay, what about the 20 million people that obtained insurance with Obamacare that didn't have it before? You should know that 16 million of them have Medicaid, basically, with the loosened eligibility criteria for Medicaid. They were allowed to get on Medicaid, and quite frankly, that could be continued without Obamacare. So you're left with roughly 4 to 5 million people that are receiving subsidies to buy Obamacare. And, I think they can be grandfathered in for a year before Obamacare is fully repealed, so they have time to find some other form of insurance. But I want you to understand that while a few, people, or let's just say several million people did benefit from Obamacare, there were many, many people that were significantly damaged by Obamacare. 20 million, 16 million of them are on Medicaid. We can continue that. So 4 to 5 million that benefited in a country of 320 million. There are 200 million Americans that have been devastated by Obamacare. Premiums and deductibles for 155 million have skyrocketed. Consumers did not keep their doctor or their plan. 11 million individuals have paid penalties for not purchasing insurance. 55 million Medicare recipients have reduced benefits, and hundreds of thousands of laborers were given part-time work in order for the companies to avoid the employer mandate. And one of the chief reasons why our so-called recovery under Obama for the last 7 or 8 years has been so anemic is in large part due to Obamacare. So many of these small companies, and that's where most of the new jobs come from, is small companies, would stop hiring in order to avoid that employer mandate. So I think a major weight on the economy. So we have the nation's largest insurers have jumped ship after losing hundreds of millions of dollars. States and counties across the land have only one insurer. In other words, they don't have any choice. Some actually have none, but some have just one. So there's no choice, really. And there's more that have just two. But we would hardly call that choice. Maybe the best way to think about it is that the healthcare market should look like a supermarket shelf, and just a typical supermarket in America. I mean, just lots of options, many different products and brands and so forth. It should not look like the supermarket shelf of Venezuela or of the former Soviet Union, where there was nothing. We need free market-based reform. Basically, and then let me say that many of the actually 3/4 of the Obamacare exchanges are bankrupt. So Obamacare has been in free fall, and the RhinoCare, the American Health Care Act, which eventually failed, would have led to an even more rapid collapse, only this time with Republican fingerprints all over it. So anyway, we look forward to a real free market-based healthcare reform bill from our Republicans who hold both houses of Congress and have a Republican president in the White House who will sign the legislation. We'll see if they'll do that. They're so disappointing in so many ways, and it's one of the reasons I ran for Congress. Let me mention is a deep frustration with the Republican Party, which I perceive more or less as a liberal progressive party, a big government party, and not really a true conservative party. And so we really need to take back that party and make it a vehicle for conservative values. Okay, let me touch on the issue of these judges, the lower court judges. That means the district level and then the appellate level or the circuit courts. I mean, they're obviously really broken. And we understand, that the executive orders that President Trump wrote or gave to limit immigration from certain countries that are predominantly Muslim, that are terrorist bastions, and that he has every right to do, were declared unconstitutional by judges who have absolutely no jurisdiction over immigration. I want you to understand that the lower courts, in other words, the circuit and district courts, which is where so many of the decisions are made, they are a creation of Congress. Congress has absolute authority over the lower courts. It can eliminate certain districts or circuits. It can get rid of the Ninth District, which is, or circuit court, which is one of the most radical left-wing courts in the country. And then the D.C. court is another one that was packed, by the way, by Obama. So, it's really time for judicial reform. And Congress is well within its constitutional rights to reform our courts. And they should do that. Now, the Supreme Court has its own, it is obviously mentioned in the Constitution. The lower courts are not. They are a creation of Congress, and it is time for serious judicial reform, limiting the jurisdiction of the courts. If we have to break up courts or create new ones that are more constitutionally minded, Congress has the ability to do that, and it's time for Congress to take a look at that and to actually begin serious judicial reform. Okay, there's something else. Let me just mention we've had some terrorist attacks in France again, and an election coming up. Hello, everyone. Dr. Richard Moss, Jasper, Indiana, ear, nose, and throat doctor, husband, father of 4, political columnist, author, ran for Congress last year, the 8th District against Larry Bouchon, Republican Party, and thinking about giving it another run, but we'll see. We're thinking about it for now. And as always, there's no shortage of things to talk about. And there's so many outrages, but for me, one of the big outrages that is occurring around the country every day, in particular on our college campuses, is... Hello, everyone. Dr. Richard Moss, Jasper, Indiana, ear, nose, and throat doctor, husband, father of 4, political columnist, author, ran for Congress last year, the 8th District against Larry Bouchon, Republican Party, and thinking about giving it another run, but we'll see. We're thinking about it for now. And as always, there's no shortage of things to talk about. And there's so many outrages, but for me, one of the big outrages that is occurring around the country every day, in particular on our college campuses, is these social justice thugs. They refer to themselves as social justice warriors, but I would not give them such a kind or generous appellation. I think thugs is really quite appropriate, and actually, I would take it further. I think referring to them for what they are, which is social justice.
Well, sorry about that, folks. It just wouldn't be a week with Evansville Real Radio, trying to broadcast across YouTube using OBS software without having a technical difficulty. And we apparently have lost the end of the broadcast and are not able to fast forward to that because that's just not the way this software works. So what I will probably end up doing is fixing this video and editing it a little bit as it is posted there and adding some sound to it. But for the moment, we have lost the tail end of that broadcast. But we will dub that in, and that will probably be available sometime within a week or so. So if you want to hear the very end of that broadcast, sorry to say, you're going to have to come back to this video and tune toward the end of it so that you can find out what was going on with those lower courts. So unfortunately, we're probably going to end up cutting our broadcast short here a little bit. And if there were a way to fix that and go in there and make that play in real time, I would do it. But I don't know how to do that quite yet. So for the moment, we're going to be stuck with just the very good words that were brought to us in the front end of that broadcast. And I will dub the others in there so that it will be available in perpetuity on YouTube. But for the live broadcast, it is not going to be there on the end. So we do thank you for tuning in. Sorry about our technical difficulty, and would want to mention that anybody who is interested in having some sort of a show, live does work a little bit better than recorded, but the recorded does work most of the time, provided that I don't hit the wrong button. But if you're interested in doing a show for us, we do have and need content on the radio program and on the radio station. So please do contact us if you have an idea for a show, and we can talk about getting you to tune in. We do also want to remind you that we have our ongoing fundraisers. You can give to raising money for the studio equipment. We're also on June 3rd having a pickup at 815 John Street, which is where we broadcast each week from, and we do appreciate their help in regards to helping us at the Business Incubator. So on June 3rd, we will have the meat fundraiser pickup. You do need to pre-order that food. It is, we're not cooking above and beyond. We're cooking to order and then having people pick it up on June 3rd. So you can tune in there, and you can also check out the Gold Value coupon books. We do thank you for tuning in. We do remind you that the mission of Evansville Real Radio is to teach Christian ethics, particularly as it relates to our political system and the American family. Again, we do thank you for tuning in. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We'll edit the final comments of Dr. Moss into the video that is on YouTube so that that is not lost in perpetuity, but it is only lost during this live broadcast, of which I think only a couple people were actually tuned in at the time that it was lost. So only me and maybe one other person knows for the moment. Thank you for tuning in. Lord bless you. Hope you have a good week.